first scream tore through the night at exactly 11:47 p.m. Not the kind of scream that comes from fear alone, but the kind that comes from someone who has seen something they were never meant to see. Run! Everybody run! Doors flew open at once. Bare feet hit the dusty road. Torches switched on. Someone tripped, someone fell, someone else didn't stop to help. From the direction of the river, a group of children burst out, crying and gasping for breath, their night clothes soaked, their eyes wide like they had been chased by death itself. Behind them, the old bell at the orphanage began to ring, not gently, violently. Clang, 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 as if someone was hitting it in panic. "Where is she?" a man shouted. "Where is Madame Adesuwa?" No one answered. Another scream came, this time from inside the orphanage compound, a child's voice, high, broken, desperate. "They are not all here. 2 of them are missing. 2!" The crowd froze. Rain started to fall, slow and heavy, soaking the ground between the river and the cemetery, the same land everyone had warned her about. Then someone pointed. "There, by the water!" A small figure was standing at the edge of the river, shaking, whispering something over and over again. When they moved closer, they heard the words. "She told us it was safe. She told us they would come back." Silence spread through the crowd like poison. And from behind them, from the direction of the cemetery, something moved. That was when the bell stopped ringing, and that was when everyone understood. Whatever had been hidden in that orphanage was no longer hidden. Welcome to Tales by Omoh. 3 months before the night everybody ran, the woman arrived in town with only 2 suitcases and a calm smile. Her name was Madame Adesuwa. No one knew much about her, not where she came from exactly, not why she chose this town out of all the places she could have gone. She simply said she had work to do and children to save. At first, people welcomed her. The town had seen many visitors before, traders, missionaries, NGO workers, so another stranger did not feel unusual. But there was something about Madame Adesuwa that made people look twice. She was polite, too polite. She spoke softly, like someone who had learned to measure every word. She dressed simply, but always in dark colors, and whenever someone asked about her family, she smiled and changed the topic. It was 1 week after her arrival that she made her announcement. She was going to build an orphanage. The news spread quickly. An orphanage meant jobs, help for abandoned children, government support, blessings. People were excited until she mentioned the land. "I've already bought a place," she said one evening at the town hall meeting. "It's perfect, quiet, away from distractions. The children will be safe there." "Where exactly?" someone asked. She hesitated just for a second. "Between the river and the old cemetery." The room went silent. Not the normal kind of silence, the kind that carries memory. An old man stood up slowly. His voice was shaking. "Madame, nobody built anything there." Others nodded. That land had a history. The river had taken lives during floods. The cemetery was older than the town itself. Strange things were said to happen at night. Lights, whispers, shadows. Some said it was cursed. Some said it was just stories. But everyone agreed on one thing. It was not a place for children. Madame Adesuwa listened to all of them, calmly, respectfully. Then she said something that made the room uncomfortable. "Children who have nowhere else to go are already living with danger. I'm just giving them a roof." No one knew how to respond to that, because she wasn't wrong. Within 2 weeks, construction began. Walls rose, a gate was fixed, a small bell was hung at the entrance, and one by one, children started arriving. from the streets, from broken homes, from places nobody wanted to talk about. Madame Adesuwa took them all. No questions, no records, no background checks, just one rule. Once a child entered her orphanage, they were not allowed to go near the river at night, and they were never allowed to step into the cemetery, ever. At the time, it sounded like protection. Now, it sounded like a warning.
From a distance, the orphanage looked harmless. Fresh paint, wide windows, a small playground with 2 swings and a slide that still smelled of new plastic. If you ignored where it was built, you would think it was a blessing. The building stood on a narrow stretch of land, the river on one side, the cemetery on the other. 2 silences, the kind of place where sound travels too clearly. During the day, the children laughed. They ran around the compound, played football with a half-flat ball, and fought over food like normal kids. To anyone watching from outside, it looked like Madame Adesuwa had done something beautiful. But inside, the rules were strict, very strict. No child was allowed outside after 7 p.m. All windows had to be closed by sunset. No one was allowed to talk about the river. No one was allowed to mention the cemetery. And every night at exactly 10 p.m., Madame Adesuwa rang the bell. Not loud, just once. It was the signal for total silence. The children didn't understand why at first, but after a few weeks, they stopped asking questions. They had learned that some questions made Madame Adesuwa's face change. Not angry, just empty. There was one child who noticed things before the others. Her name was Ife. She was 9 years old, quiet, and always watching. Ife had the kind of eyes that looked like they were older than her body. She had been brought from the city after her parents disappeared in a fire. At night, Ife sometimes heard sounds. Not loud sounds, soft ones, like water moving when there was no wind, like footsteps on gravel coming from the cemetery side, like someone whispering her name when everyone else was asleep. When she told the other children, they laughed. "You're just scared," they said. "This place is better than the streets." And maybe they were right. The food was regular, the beds were clean, nobody beat them, nobody starved. Madame Adesuwa was kind in her own way. She never shouted, never raised her hand, never insulted any child. But she watched them, always. She knew who slept where, who talked in their dreams, who woke up at night, who stood too close to the fence, especially the fence near the river. One evening, Ife asked her a simple question. "Madame, why did you choose this place?" Madame Adesuwa looked at the river, then at the cemetery, then back at Ife, and she said softly, "Because some places already know how to keep secrets." That night, Ife dreamed of water rising from the ground and bells ringing, not from the orphanage, from under the earth. After the first month, something changed, not in the way the orphanage looked, but in the way the children behaved. Some of them began to talk in their sleep. Not normal sleep talking. They whispered names, numbers, words that did not sound like any language the others knew. One boy, Tunde, started waking up every night at exactly 2:13 a.m. He would sit straight up in bed, eyes open, staring at the wall facing the cemetery. When asked what he saw, he always gave the same answer. "They're counting us." Another girl, Zainab, refused to drink water anymore. Not from the tap, not from bottles, not even rainwater. She said it tasted old. Nobody understood what she meant, but Ife noticed something else. Every morning, Madame Adesuwa checked the attendance board, not just to see who was present, but to see who looked different. She would stand there for a long time staring at their faces, especially their eyes. Sometimes she touched their foreheads gently, like she was checking temperature. Other times, she wrote strange notes in a small black notebook she never let anyone read. One afternoon, Ife followed her, quietly. Madame Adesuwa walked to the back of the compound near the fence that separated the orphanage from the cemetery. She knelt down and pressed her palm against the soil. She whispered something. The ground was dry, but her hand came back wet. That was the day one child went missing for the first time. His name was Sola. No alarm was raised, no police were called. Madame Adesuwa simply said, "He has been transferred." Transferred where? No one knew. But that night, Sola's bed was still warm, and the bell rang twice. After Sola disappeared, the orphanage felt different. Not quieter, not louder, just thinner, like something had been removed from the air. The children started counting themselves without realizing it. At breakfast, at playtime, before bed, they would pause, look around, and whisper numbers under their breath. 23. No, 22. Wasn't Sola here? Madame Adesuwa never corrected them. She simply crossed Sola's name off the board. No explanation, no goodbye, no report. When one of the caregivers asked about him, Madame Adesuwa's voice became firm for the first time. He has been placed somewhere better. Better where? No address, no records, no visitors ever came to ask for him. Then the smells started. At night, a strange scent drifted into the dormitories. Not smoke, not rot, something like wet earth mixed with metal. Ife noticed it always came from the same direction, the river. Some children began having the same dream. They dreamed of standing in a long line, barefoot, holding hands, facing the water. On the other side of the river, figures were waiting for them, not people, shadows shaped like people. One by one, the children in the dream stepped forward, and one by one, they disappeared. When Ife told Madame Adesuwa about the dreams, she didn't look surprised. She looked relieved. "Dreams are just the mind trying to heal," she said. "Don't be afraid of them." But that same night, Ife saw something she was not meant to see. She woke up to use the bathroom and noticed light coming from Madame Adesuwa's office. The door was slightly open. Inside, the black notebook lay on the table, open, and beside it, drawn in red ink, was a list of names. Sola's name was there, with a line through it. Below it were other names, some already crossed out, some not yet. Her name was Mrs. Halima Yusuf. She was a social welfare officer sent from the state capital to inspect newly registered care homes. On paper, Madame Adesuwa's orphanage looked perfect. Good funding, clean records, no complaints. But Mrs. Halima had learned something from years of work. The places that look the cleanest usually hide the most. She arrived on a Tuesday morning, unannounced. The children were lined up neatly. The beds were made. The food was already cooking. Madame Adesuwa welcomed her with a warm smile. "You should have called first," she said gently. Mrs. Halima smiled back. Real care homes don't need warnings. They walked through the compound together. Mrs. Halima noticed things immediately. The attendance board had no dates, no surnames, no birth records, just first names and numbers. "Where are the children's files?" she asked. Madame Adesuwa paused. Most of them came without documents. They were abandoned, forgotten. Mrs. Halima wrote something in her notebook. Then she noticed the fence, the one near the river. It was taller than the rest and newly reinforced. "Have there been escape attempts?" she asked. Madame Adesuwa followed her gaze. "No, only sleepwalkers." That answer stayed in Mrs. Halima's mind. Before leaving, she asked one final question. "How many children are here?" Madame Adesuwa answered immediately. 21. Mrs. Halima looked back at the line. She counted again. There were 22.
Mrs. Halima did not leave the town that day. Instead, she went to the oldest place she could think of, the small local library beside the council office. Dusty shelves, faded newspapers, handwritten records. She asked only one question. What used to be on the land between the river and the cemetery? The librarian, an old woman with cloudy eyes, went silent. That land? She repeated. You mean the crossing? The crossing? Mrs. Halima asked. The old woman nodded slowly. Long before the town expanded, that place was where they brought the sick, the mad, the unwanted. When people believed certain spirits followed families, they brought the children there. Mrs. Halima felt a chill. What happened to them? The old woman didn't answer immediately. She pulled out an old file. Inside were reports from decades ago. Children disappearing, mass drownings during floods, unmarked graves added to the cemetery, and one repeated phrase in several documents: the river takes what the ground prepares. According to the stories, the land was believed to be a threshold, a place between worlds. The river was said to carry spirits away, and the cemetery was said to hold the ones that refused to go. Between them was where rituals happened. Not official rituals, desperate ones. The kind done by parents who believed they were saving their children by giving them up. Mrs. Halima closed the file slowly. That night, she stood across the road from the orphanage. The bell rang at 10 p.m. Once. From where she stood, she saw something strange. For a brief moment, shadows appeared on the fence. Small shadows, standing in a line. But when she blinked, they were gone. Only the sound of water remained. Flowing. Waiting. Madame Adesuwa rarely spoke of her past, but in quiet moments, when no one was watching, the walls of the orphanage seemed to whisper back to her, memories she could never fully escape. She had grown up in a city far from this town, in a home that called itself kind, but hid cruelty in its silence. Her parents were respected, wealthy, and deeply religious, yet behind closed doors, they had secrets. They experimented with spiritual rituals, supposedly to protect the family, but one of those rituals went horribly wrong. Her younger brother disappeared. No explanation, no funeral, no closure. Madame Adesuwa carried the guilt of not being able to save him. For years, she searched for answers. She studied everything: folklore, ancient practices, psychology, child care, and the human mind. She became an expert in both nurturing and control. She learned something few understood. Some places remember the suffering that happened there. Some land holds the memories of the lost, and if you know how, you can bend it, not entirely, but just enough to protect or punish. When she chose the land between the river and the cemetery, it was not random. She believed it held power. Power to keep the children safe from the world, and, in a strange way, to keep the spirits of the lost from harming the living. Madame Adesuwa's moral gray came from this. She wanted to save the children. She wanted to control the dangerous forces she believed existed, but she also kept secrets the children had no right to know. And in doing so, she was willing to risk things she could not entirely control. That night, she walked along the riverbank, barefoot, listening to the water. "I will not fail again," she whispered to herself. The wind carried her words to the cemetery, and somewhere among the stones, something answered. It was not a voice, not a sound, just a ripple in the earth that made her pause. Madame Adesuwa smiled faintly. Somewhere between fear and hope, she knew the line she walked would never be straight, and perhaps that was the only way to survive in this place. Ife had learned to watch and listen. She saw things the other children didn't notice, the way Madame Adesuwa's eyes lingered on some children more than others, the way she sometimes touched the walls near the river and whispered names, the strange notebook she always hid. One night, when the bell rang at 10 p.m., Ife couldn't sleep. Something tugged at her curiosity stronger than fear. She crept out of her dormitory, moving silently across the cold floor. By the fence nearest the river, she saw a faint glow. Madame Adesuwa was kneeling there, hands pressed against the soil, murmuring words that sounded almost like a chant. Ife held her breath. She didn't understand the language, but she understood the intention: control, protection, command. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps behind her startled her. It was Mrs. Halima. "I thought I'd find you here," she whispered, voice low but firm. Ife froze, but then something inside her clicked. Together, they watched as Madame Adesuwa opened the black notebook. Names, dates, symbols, and strange marks next to some children's names, some crossed out, some circled, some with a tiny red line leading toward the river. Mrs. Halima gasped quietly. "Is this what I think it is?" she asked. Ife shook her head. "She's protecting them, but she's also sending some of them somewhere." Mrs. Halima's mind raced. The missing children, the river, the cemetery, the whispers at night. The puzzle pieces clicked together. "This place, it's not just an orphanage. It's something else, something tied to the land." Ife nodded. Madame Adesuwa finished her chant and stood. Her eyes swept the area, almost sensing them. "Go back to your beds," she said softly. Her voice was calm, almost kind. Ife and Mrs. Halima obeyed, but as they walked away, the wind carried a sound neither could ignore. The faintest splash, as if water was moving where no river existed. And for the first time, both of them understood. Some children might never return. Some secrets were older than anyone alive, and the line between protection and danger had already been crossed. The following morning, the town gathered at the orphanage. Whispers had spread, missing children, strange happenings, the reinforced fence, the mysterious riverside lights. Mrs. Halima finally confronted Madame Adesuwa, standing firmly at the gate. "Madam," she said, voice steady despite her fear, "what is happening here? Where are the children who disappeared?" Madame Adesuwa's eyes softened, but her posture did not change. "They are safe," she said calmly, "safer than they would be anywhere else. I promise them protection." Mrs. Halima's fists tightened. "Safe? Safe means you keep them alive, not hiding them, sending them into the river, into the cemetery?" Madame Adesuwa's expression darkened slightly. "You do not understand. Not yet. The world outside here is far more dangerous than you can imagine. The river and the cemetery, they are thresholds. The children here are being protected from things that most people cannot see, cannot comprehend." Ife stepped forward, her small voice trembling but firm. "Madam, the children are scared. Some of them, some never come back from the river walks. They dream, shadows wait for them. I hear them whispering names at night." Madame Adesuwa looked at her. Then, for the first time, a hint of regret touched her face. "I never wanted fear to enter their hearts," she said, "but some choices cannot be clean. The land remembers what the world forgets. I am only trying to balance it, and sometimes balance requires sacrifice." Mrs. Halima shook her head. Sacrifice? How many children must disappear before you realize what you are doing is wrong? Madame Adesuwa's eyes, hard yet weary, met Mrs. Halima's. I wish I could do more. I wish I could do better, but there are rules older than both of us. If I bend them completely, the cost would be worse than you can imagine. A hush fell over the crowd. Even the children were silent, sensing the weight of what was being said. The moral question hung in the air. Was she a savior or a keeper of something darker? No one spoke. No one dared. And then, from the direction of the river, came a sound that froze every heartbeat. A child screaming. The line had been crossed, and nothing would ever be the same. It was the same night as the first scream, but now everyone understood why the panic had erupted. Children ran from the orphanage, their cries mixing with the pounding rain. The river, swollen from the evening storm, churned angrily against its banks. The cemetery loomed like a wall of forgotten souls. Shadows shifted among the gravestones as if the dead themselves were watching. Ife clutched Mrs. Halima's hand as they guided the children through the mud, the screams echoing behind them. From the orphanage, the bell rang violently, louder than it ever had before. Madame Adesuwa stood at the fence, face pale but determined. "Keep moving," she shouted, even as the water lapped dangerously near the riverbank. One child tripped.
Dawn came slowly over the small town. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and shining. Birds returned, but the air still carried the heavy scent of wet earth and lingering fear. The children were gathered in the orphanage courtyard, tired, shivering, but alive. Madame Adesuwa walked among them, her face calm but weary. "Some of you saw things you were not meant to see," she said softly. "Some of you felt fear. That is natural. But the world is full of unseen dangers, and sometimes, to protect life, you must face hard choices." Mrs. Halima stood nearby, notebook in hand, silent. She had seen too much to speak immediately. But one thing was clear. Madame Adesuwa had acted with intention, even if the consequences were unsettling. Ife, her small hand raised, finally asked the question that had been on everyone's mind. "Madam, were you good or bad?" Madame Adesuwa looked toward the river and the cemetery, then back at the children. "Neither entirely," she said. "I am human. I try to do good, but sometimes good comes with shadows. Remember this. It is not enough to want to save lives. You must understand the world you live in, the places you walk through, and the choices you make. Every action has weight. Every land, every person remembers." The children nodded, some confused, some relieved, but all wiser than before. Mrs. Halima turned to the audience, or rather, she would if this were her story to tell. "And you, listening now," she said quietly, "think about the choices you make. Protect those you can, respect the ground you walk on, and remember, not all danger is obvious, not all evil wears a face, and not all good is simple. Some lessons are learned only by surviving the night."
Madame Adesuwa rang the bell one last time. Not violently, just once. It was a signal of reflection, a reminder, a promise. The camera of your mind lingers on the orphanage, standing quietly between river and cemetery. A place of life, death, protection, and mystery. And as you close your eyes tonight, remember, some places remember, some choices never truly fade, and some guardians walk a line you might never fully understand. Moral lesson: every choice has consequences, even when intentions are good. Protection may require hard decisions, but balance is key. The world is full of unseen forces. Respect life. Respect land. If this story made you uncomfortable, then it has done its job. Because the most dangerous things in life are not always monsters. Sometimes they are choices made with good intentions. Ask yourself tonight, if you had the power to protect people you love, but the method was wrong, would you still do it? Would you cross the line like Madam Adesuwa? Or would you walk away and let fate decide? This is Tales by Omoh, where stories are not just for entertainment, but for reflection, awareness, and truth. If you believe stories should make us think, not just feel, then like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Because some lessons are not taught in schools, they are learned by surviving the night. See you guys in our next chapter. Bye.